Someone has rightly said, if your voice is loud, a few people will listen. But if your words carry wisdom, many will listen. Greetings, friends, and welcome to the Soul Scripted YouTube channel. Today, let me share a short story with you, one that carries a profound lesson. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the dusty road that wound through the arid countryside. Arjun, a young man with rugged features and weary eyes, trudged along the path. His clothes were worn, his sandals frayed, and his stomach churned with hunger. Life had been unkind to him, a constant struggle to make ends meet. He kicked at a stone, his frustration spilling over into the silence. "What's the point of trying?" he muttered to himself. "No matter how hard I work, I never get ahead. Maybe it's time I stop playing fair." Lost in his thoughts, Arjun almost didn't notice the strange figure ahead. An old man, bent with age, was struggling to carry 3 heavy bags slung over his shoulders. Each bag seemed large and unwieldy, the weight evident in the way the old man's knees trembled with every step. His robes were simple, his beard long and white, and his eyes held a glimmer of serenity, despite the obvious strain on his frail body. As Arjun drew closer, the old man stopped and turned to him. "Greetings, young man," he said, his voice warm but tired. "Would you lend me a hand?" Arjun hesitated, his instincts urging him to be cautious. "What's in the bags?" he asked, eyeing them suspiciously. The old man smiled faintly. "Copper coins," he replied. "They're for the villagers in the mountains. They've been waiting for this for weeks, and I promised I'd bring it to them." "Why don't you hire someone to help you?" Arjun asked, folding his arms. The old man chuckled softly. "If I could afford to hire help, I wouldn't be here carrying these bags myself, would I?" Arjun couldn't help but crack a small smile at the man's humor. But the smile quickly faded as another thought crept into his mind. What if he's lying? What if those bags are filled with gold or something even more valuable? The old man seemed to sense his hesitation. "If you help me," he said, "I'll give you 3 gold coins as a token of my gratitude." Arjun's eyes widened. Gold? A single coin could feed him for months, and this man was offering 3? The temptation was immediate and powerful, but so was his suspicion. "Why would you give me gold for carrying copper?" he asked, his tone cautious. "Kindness deserves to be rewarded," the old man replied simply. Arjun stared at him, weighing his options. The rational part of his mind told him to walk away. It was too good to be true, but the allure of gold was hard to ignore. After a long pause, he finally nodded. "All right, Baba, I'll help you." The old man's face lit up with gratitude. "Thank you, my boy. Together, we can reach the village by sunset." Arjun bent down and grabbed one of the heavy bags, slinging it over his shoulder. The weight was staggering, almost making him stumble. He gritted his teeth and adjusted his stance. "These are heavier than they look," Arjun muttered, glancing at the old man who was still holding the other 2 bags. The old man chuckled lightly. "Yes, they are. But together, we'll manage. The village isn't too far now." The 2 began walking, their footsteps crunching against the dirt path. At first, they traveled in silence, the only sounds coming from the swaying of the bags and the rustle of the occasional breeze through the sparse trees. Arjun's mind, however, was far from quiet. His thoughts churned, analyzing the situation. Why would someone so old and frail carry such a burden all alone? And why would he offer gold to a stranger like me? As they walked further, the road became quieter, with fewer travelers and homes. The bustling noise of the nearby town faded away, replaced by the occasional chirping of birds. Arjun couldn't suppress his curiosity any longer. "Baba," he began cautiously, "if these bags are so important, why didn't you ask someone from the village to help you?" The old man smiled faintly, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. "Sometimes the people who need help the most have no one to ask," he said. "Besides, I believe that when you seek kindness, it often finds you." Arjun snorted softly. "Kindness is rare these days, Baba. Most people only help if they see what's in it for them." The old man glanced at him, his eyes twinkling with wisdom. "And what about you, my boy? What made you agree to help me?" Arjun hesitated. He could feel the man's gaze, piercing but kind, as though he already knew the answer. Well, you said you'd give me gold, he admitted, his voice trailing off. The old man nodded knowingly. Honesty is a good quality, he said. Hold on to it. It will take you far in life. Arjun shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to respond. They continued in silence for a while, the road now stretching into a long, desolate path with no end in sight. The weight of the bag on Arjun's shoulders seemed to grow heavier with each step, and the whispers of doubt in his mind began to grow louder. As the journey stretched on, Arjun's mind started to wander. What if the bags don't just contain copper coins? What if there's something far more valuable inside? Why else would this old man offer gold for something so trivial? The thoughts gnawed at him, their weight almost as heavy as the bag he carried. But then another voice in his mind interrupted. No, that's wrong. He trusted you. You can't betray that trust for a quick gain. Besides, it's just copper. He said so himself. Arjun shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. What's in the other 2 bags, Baba? He asked, trying to sound casual. Why do you ask? The old man replied with a smile. No reason, Arjun said quickly, avoiding his gaze. I was just curious. They're the same as the one you're carrying, the old man said. Copper coins, all for the village. Their homes were destroyed in the flood, you see. These coins will help them rebuild. Arjun felt a pang of guilt. He glanced at the old man, who was struggling under the weight of the 2 remaining bags, his frail body visibly trembling with each step. Maybe he's telling the truth. Maybe these really are just copper coins. But the darker part of his mind wouldn't let go. What if he's lying? What if there's gold or jewels in these bags and he's using this story to get someone to carry them for him? He's old. He wouldn't be able to stop me if I took them and ran. The thought startled him. Arjun stopped in his tracks, his breath catching in his throat. He shook his head again, more forcefully this time. No, he muttered under his breath. That's not right. The old man paused a few steps ahead and turned back to look at him. Is something wrong, my boy? He asked gently. No, nothing, Arjun said quickly, forcing a smile. I just needed to adjust the bag. The old man nodded and continued walking, his pace slow but steady. Arjun fell in step behind him, his thoughts a storm of conflict. You can't do this, Arjun. You can't steal from an old man who trusted you. What kind of person would that make you? But as they passed through another desolate stretch of road, the temptation grew stronger. This is your chance. No one's around. He's too weak to chase you, and there's no one here to stop you. Just take the bags and run. Arjun clenched his fists, his heart pounding. He had always prided himself on being a good person, even when life had been cruel to him. But the allure of what might be inside those bags was overwhelming. As the 2 continued their journey, Arjun's thoughts grew heavier than the bag on his shoulder. He glanced at the old man, who seemed to walk without complaint, his frail body visibly laboring under the weight of the 2 bags. The sight evoked pity in Arjun's heart for a fleeting moment, but greed swiftly snuffed it out. The road was now deserted, bordered by overgrown shrubs and the occasional twisted tree. No houses, no passers-by, no witnesses. This is it, Arjun. If you're going to do it, now's the time. He slowed his pace slightly, allowing the old man to walk a few steps ahead. His fingers tightened around the strap of the bag on his shoulder. His pulse raced as a dark plan began forming in his mind. You can't do this, a voice in his head whispered urgently. Why not? Another voice countered. What has the world ever done for you, Arjun? You've lived hand-to-mouth for years. This could change everything. He trusted you. He called you kind. Are you really going to betray that trust? Trust doesn't fill your belly. It doesn't buy a roof over your head. This is your chance, your only chance, to escape the misery of your life. Arjun clenched his jaw, his mind torn in two. He wanted to stop, to walk away from the temptation gnawing at him, but the idea of what might be inside those bags was irresistible. Baba, he said finally, his voice hesitant. Can we stop for a moment? I need to rest." The old man turned, concern etched on his face. "Of course, my boy. Let's sit here for a moment." He set down the 2 bags he was carrying with a soft grunt and sat on a nearby rock. Arjun placed his bag on the ground and sat a few feet away, his hands trembling as he wiped the sweat from his brow. The old man reached into the folds of his robe and pulled out a small water pouch. He took a sip, then offered it to Arjun. "Here, have some water. It'll help." Arjun hesitated before taking the pouch. "Thank you," he mumbled, taking a small sip. As he handed it back, his eyes flicked to the bags resting on the ground. The temptation was too much to bear. His heart pounded in his chest as he made up his mind. "Baba," he began hesitantly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, my boy," the old man replied, his tone kind and patient. "Why are you so sure the village will use these coins wisely? What if someone else takes them before you get there?" The old man's smile faltered slightly, but his eyes remained calm. "I trust in the goodness of people, Arjun. Not everyone is kind, but kindness has a way of finding its way to those who truly need it." Arjun's chest tightened. "He's talking about you. He thinks you're kind. Are you really going to do this to him?" But before he could second-guess himself, the darker voice in his mind took over. "You're not kind. You're desperate. There's a difference. Take the bags and go." Suddenly, Arjun sprang to his feet and grabbed the bag he had been carrying. Without a word, he slung it over his shoulder and reached for one of the old man's bags. The old man looked up in surprise, his frail hands reaching out in protest. "Arjun, what are you doing?" "I'm sorry, Baba," Arjun said, his voice trembling with guilt and determination. "I can't live like this anymore. I need this more than they do." "Wait, my boy," the old man said, his voice calm despite the situation. "Think about what you're doing. You're making a choice you cannot undo." Arjun hesitated for a brief moment, the weight of the old man's words pulling at his conscience. But the lure of a better life was too strong. Without another word, he turned and ran down the road, the 2 bags bouncing heavily against his back. After running for what felt like an eternity, Arjun finally stopped in a secluded spot, panting heavily. He dropped the bags onto the ground and sank to his knees, sweat dripping from his brow. "This is it," he muttered to himself, his hands trembling as he reached for the nearest bag. "This is my chance to start over." He untied the bag with shaking fingers and peered inside, expecting to see the glint of gold or the sparkle of jewels. But what he saw instead made his heart sink. Iron coins, hundreds of them, each one dull and covered in patches of rust. "No," he whispered, his voice breaking. He opened the second bag, desperate to find something valuable, but it too was filled with nothing but rusted iron coins. Arjun's mind raced. This can't be right. There has to be more. As he frantically searched the bags, his fingers brushed against something. A folded piece of parchment buried beneath the coins. He pulled it out and unfolded it, his eyes scanning the words written in neat, careful handwriting. Arjun unfolded the parchment, his hands trembling as his heart thudded against his ribcage. He stared at the faded writing, each word seeming to weigh heavier than the last. "To the one who succumbs to greed. If you are reading this letter, it means you have chosen to betray trust and act out of selfishness. What you now hold in your possession are not treasures, but mere iron coins, tarnished and worthless, symbols of how greed blinds the heart. This journey was never about wealth. It was a test of character. I am not a fakir but the king of this land, and I disguised myself to find someone worthy of my trust and the responsibility of serving others. The wealth I spoke of was never material. The true riches are honesty, integrity, and kindness, qualities a leader or a noble soul must possess. You had the opportunity to embrace these virtues, but you let greed guide your actions. Yet this is not the end. Life is a journey of choices. You can choose to continue down this path, weighed down by greed, or you can strive to change, to live a life of virtue and purpose. The decision is yours. Arjun's breath hitched as the letter slipped from his hands and fluttered to the ground. He stared at the bags of rusted iron coins, his chest tightening with shame and guilt. For a moment, he felt the overwhelming urge to throw the bags away and run back to the old man, to confess everything and beg for forgiveness. But then a deeper realization struck him. "This isn't about him forgiving me," Arjun whispered, his voice breaking. "It's about me forgiving myself and choosing to change." He sank to the ground, his face buried in his hands as tears streamed down his cheeks. "I've failed," he muttered, "but I can't let this failure define me." The rusted coins clinked faintly in the bags, their sound a constant reminder of his choices. Arjun sat there for hours, lost in thought, replaying the journey in his mind. The kindness of the old man, his own moment of greed, and the emptiness that followed. As the sun began to set, painting the horizon with hues of gold and crimson, Arjun finally stood up. He looked at the bags one last time and whispered, "This weight is not mine to carry anymore." He left the bags by the roadside, taking only the memory of the lesson he had learned. As he walked away, he resolved to live a life of honesty, humility, and purpose. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, Arjun felt unburdened. The letter's words echoed in his mind, a guiding light for the journey to come. Life is a journey of choices. True wealth lies not in gold, but in the virtues we cultivate. And with that, Arjun disappeared into the distance, a man forever changed by the wisdom of a simple letter. Arjun's story is a reflection of the timeless struggle between human desires and the pursuit of virtue. It teaches us that greed, no matter how tempting, is a trap that blinds us to the true treasures of life: integrity, self-awareness, and compassion. Buddha once said, "You only lose what you cling to." Greed arises when we cling to material possessions, believing they will bring happiness and fulfillment. But just like the rusted coins Arjun carried, such attachments weigh us down and lead to regret. Greed, when unchecked, corrupts the mind, weakens the spirit, and pushes us further away from inner peace. Buddha also taught that the key to overcoming greed lies in mindfulness, being fully present and aware of our thoughts and actions. As he famously said, "The mind is everything. What you think, you become." If Arjun had paused to reflect on his choices earlier, he might have seen the futility of his greed and embraced the virtue of helping others selflessly. True success, as the Gautam Buddha taught, is not measured by wealth or power, but by the cultivation of inner virtues. 1. Contentment. Health is the greatest gift, contentment the greatest wealth, faithfulness the best relationship. Contentment comes not from having more, but from appreciating what we already have. Greed grows when we constantly chase after what we do not need, while contentment brings peace and happiness. 2. Right intention. With our thoughts, we make the world. Success begins with pure intentions. Arjun's initial intention to help the old man was noble, but it was tainted by greed. Buddha emphasized the importance of aligning our actions with kindness and compassion rather than selfish desires. 3. Self-control. To conquer oneself is a greater victory than to conquer thousands in a battle. Arjun's story demonstrates the importance of mastering the mind. He struggled against the voice of greed, and while he ultimately faltered, his reflection showed him the path to growth. 4. Letting go. Attachment leads to suffering. Arjun's attachment to the idea of wealth caused him to lose sight of his values. By letting go of the bags, he symbolically freed himself from the weight of his desires, opening the door to true transformation. The story also reminds us of the importance of trust and honesty. Trust is fragile, and once broken, it is difficult to repair. Arjun learned that betrayal for material gain only leads to emptiness, while integrity builds character and lasting relationships. In the end, Gautam Buddha's teachings on karma come to mind. Our life is shaped by our mind. We become what we think. Joy follows a pure thought like a shadow that never leaves. Arjun's choice to reflect on his mistakes and strive for a better path was his first step toward a life of virtue and peace. Practical tips which you can practice in your daily life. 1. When faced with temptation, pause and ask yourself, is this choice aligned with my values? 2. Practice gratitude daily to overcome greed and foster contentment. 3. Cultivate mindfulness to recognize and let go of negative thoughts before they take root. 4. Remember that success is not about how much you have, but how you live. As Buddha said, a disciplined mind brings happiness. Arjun's journey, like our own, is one of learning and growth. We are not defined by our mistakes, but by how we rise above them. The true path to success lies in mastering the mind, embracing virtue, and living a life guided by wisdom and compassion. As Arjun's story teaches us, greed can blind us, but self-reflection can lead us to true wisdom. What would you have done if you were in Arjun's place? Would you have carried the bag selflessly or been tempted by greed? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Also, let us know your favorite takeaway from Gautam Buddha's teachings in this story. Your insights could inspire others. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more wisdom stories, and hit the bell icon to stay updated. Let's build a community that learns and grows together.